Hello and welcome back to Following Along with Unity's Beginner Code series. In this second half of part 2, we're going to go ahead and create our spawn function that we decided to do in the first video. And then afterwards, we will look at the game structure and create our own usable items and item effects. All right, let's get started with functions. So if you remember the first video, we had an introduction to functions here when we created the print hello function, and we called it here and printed hello to the console. We're going to do something very similar with the spawn function. So that's right below this here. We'll go ahead. It'll also return void. We'll name it spawn potion. Give it our parentheses and our brackets. Okay, and what we want to do is we want to take these 4 lines right here and simply copy them, paste them right down in here. Okay, and then this will be our spawn potion function. Okay, so then what we can do, we can get rid of all of this, and this would just be spawn potion. Okay, and we do the same thing for all 3 areas where we have other spawns. Here, and there. Okay, and let's get rid of the print hello function. We're not going to be needing that. That's just going to create more mess. And anytime you're not using a function, it really shouldn't be in your script at all. So we'll go ahead and just delete the function itself too. Okay. So now we've got issues. We can see down here that, we got the red squiggly line saying angle doesn't exist in this current context. Well, that goes back to scope. Remember from the first video, we have 2 functions here, and we have these variables declared inside the start function. Now the spawn function has no idea they exist. Okay, so we can fix that very simply. We can take all these that it needs the angle and radius, and we can make them global. Okay, so now that they're global, and delta A will keep inside the start function. Not really anything that's only used inside of that function really should be local, and there's a reason why these were local. So this is actually poor style, but since it works, we're going to try it for right now, and then we're going to fix it here within a minute or two. In the meantime, we're going to clean this code up a little bit. As you can see, the spawn position variable is declared with the value of transformed opposition, and then down here it is also changed to transformed opposition plus direction times radius. Well, we can clean this up a bit here. We'll actually just declare it down here one time. Okay, we'll delete this. Okay, clean that up nice. Okay, and there it is. Now we've declared our delta A variable here, so that we know what the change in angle is. We start by spawning our potion with the original angle and radius. Okay, the radius does not change. And then we continue to the next one with a new angle, which has been incremented by the delta angle. Okay, and we continue on. So every time that we would want to make a new spawn, we would take these 2, copy and paste them down. Okay, so let's just take a look and make sure that it does work. Save that, and we'll look at our project here. Let it compile, and it should compile. Okay, let's just hit play and see that it does work the same. Okay, there we are. Okay, good deal. All right, looking back at the script. Now, the problems here are that we've created global variables that were not there before, and these variables really only used inside the start function so that we can spawn our potions. So we want them back in here. Okay, let's put them back in. Okay, and now also our spawn function, our spawn potion function, excuse me, it really, it's hard to understand what it does. You know, if you're calling this function without knowing how to call it, and you, okay, I want to spawn potion. Okay, here it is down here. Let's call it. Okay, it doesn't take any, it takes no arguments, you know, it doesn't have any parameters inside. So I really don't know how to use it, you know, and this would actually spawn a potion directly on top of this potion right here because the angle has not been changed. Okay, and if it would work. Okay, so that's kind of poor style. We want it to be more direct in the way that you use it. And the way we'll do that is we'll give it parameters. Okay, so we want to give it an int angle parameter so that it knows what angle do I want to spawn from, the origin. And then we also want to give it the radius as a parameter. Okay. And the reason I'm putting the underscore in front is so I can show you the difference between our scopes here, that these variables exist only in this scope. Okay, and that's what we're doing here. When we pass an argument into the parameter, you'll see how we do this here in a second, that it's actually using this value it's passed in, and it's creating a new variable inside the scope based on this value. Okay, and it gets somewhat complicated, so we'll kind of leave it at that and keep going. So now we see that when we try to spawn a potion, you know, we need parameters, we need arguments. Okay, and if we look, it says, okay, I need an angle and a radius. So we'll give it the angle, which is angle. And we'll give it the radius. Okay. And now it'll work. Okay. So now we know that each time we want our angle to increment. So our new angle every time, we don't need the semicolon. We'll copy and paste this. Okay. Put it in there while I got it. And our radius. Okay. Put that in each one. Okay. And then we can get rid of this because we've incremented inside of the argument. Okay, and we talk about that in the first video, how it'll evaluate this expression first and pass it as the value into the function. The function will never even know that this expression was there. It'll only know about the value that was passed into it. So get rid of that, get rid of that, clean that up nice. Now we can see that anytime we want to spawn a new potion, it's a lot more direct in how we do it. Okay, if we tried to call this function later in the code, let's suppose, I mean, if this code was much larger and we later on wanted to spawn a potion and we had no idea how to do it, you know, it's going to throw a fit here. It's going to say, oh man, I need an angle and I need a radius. So we know that it's going to need an angle and a radius. We have to define a number in here. And if we want to give it an angle of 12, a radius of 5, say, and then it will be happy, you know, which that makes it nice because we aren't constrained to this angle or this radius or even this change. If we wanted to spawn a potion that has nothing to do with this pattern, we can put any number in here we want to, but this time we're not going to. So now we have a much cleaner code here. Okay, much nicer to look at. And let's always test it. We'll play test it here. Make sure it's the same as we expect. Compiled. We have code in the same position. So there we have that. Now, one more thing I want to mention here before we move on. Let me get rid of this. I cannot stand extra white space. Is we want to document our functions, okay? And this will help a lot too when we call our functions. And if you have Visual Studio, it's a lot easy. It's pretty easy to set up your documentation. You just hit there you go, 3 times. It automatically does it. Okay. In our summary, you just want to describe what the function does, and this will spawns an object at given angle and radius and origin. Let's say. Okay. So now you get if you're trying to call this function later, it'll pop up a little thing down here, and you can see. I'm not sure if it'll. Doesn't really zoom in. I hope you can see that, but it says your documentation actually pops up down here. Okay, and that makes it really, really nice. Okay, and now let's describe what our parameters do. Our angle is our angle to spawn from origin. Okay, and similarly, the radius is the radius to spawn from origin. Okay, so now we know what our parameters do. Okay, and if it pops up down here, it says radius to spawn from origin. Okay, it makes it much nicer now. Anyone who doesn't know what this function actually does, now they can get a much clearer idea when they look at the documentation. So that's something you really want to do. And even with your classes, you would do a similar thing right here. You would give a summary of what a spawner sample is. And if someone perhaps didn't know, well, what it does is it spawns an object in the scene, or something similar to that, So now that, anyone who needs to call this class anywhere else or whatever would know that, what we're doing here. And that just makes it much nicer to look at. If you haven't seen this code before and you're looking at it for the first time, it's much nicer to know what you're looking at, what it does, and how to call the functions inside. Okay, so that being said, we can move on here. Okay, next we're going to look at the game structure. All right, so in order to create our own items and usable effects, we need to understand how they're defined in the game and how they are created and such. So if we look at our, let's see here, where's the potion spawner? We see that down in the spawner sample script, we have the public object to spawn, which is in our script, and that points to the potion loot. Okay. If we look at that, we see that it has a loot script on it that points to an item called potion. Okay, that's up here. If we click on that, this is our item data right here. This is what defines our item here. Okay, so we give it an item sprite, a name, a description if you want to, the object prefab, which is what would spawn out in the world, and then any effects that you want to give it, which this one here looks like has the health effect script, which is down here. And it gives you 20% of health for, that's it. Okay. So now we see that there's kind of a lot involved in it. Not only do we have potion spawners, but we also have loot scripts and loot prefabs, that define what loot it is. And then inside of that, we have items, It's a little complicated, but it's actually better this way because it separates all your code and all your the technical side of things from the development side. Right here, we can just sit here and say what's a potion you want to do, and this is where you decide that, and then it's nice to separate everything, and then we can decide what item is our potion spawner going to spawn. Okay, instead of say a potion, we can create our own potion and put it in there, and that's what we're going to do. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll have to first create our own usable item, and the way we want to do that is go into assets, the beginner code, prefabs item database, and here we are, and we want to click on that to create beginner code, and we want to make a new usable item. Okay. Usable item. We'll give it a name. This will be the agility potion. Okay. So there's our agility potion. Okay, but it doesn't really have any effects. Okay, so we have to create our own effects. And the way we do that is up at the top here, we go to beginner code, create item effect. Okay, and then we give it a name. We're going to call this change agility effect. Create that. Okay. And that created a new script for us inside the scripts folder that we created last video. And it created a subfolder inside called item effects, and then gave us a new script. So let's take a look at that script here. Okay, so here's our script. And inside they already gave us a class named use, which gives us the character data, and they give us the name of the user for that. And what that is that's all the data of the character that's using the potion that should have the effect on them. Okay, so let's see what they give us here. If we just type in user dot, and then that will give us everything that we can access inside of that class. And right here we have stats. So let's take a look at the stats dot stats and see what that gives us. All right, there's our agility on top. And you see we have our defense and some other stats here too we can modify as well. I'm going to stick with agility. Let's try to do a plus equals, let's say 5. Okay, that all type check, so that should work. And then we also want it to return true. Okay. Now one thing I want to do here is I want the ability to be able to change the change amount inside of the inspector. So what we need to do is have a public field, public int, we'll name it change amount. Okay, and we'll give it a default value of 5. We really don't need to give it any value at all, but actually just to show that we won't. Let's not do that. Okay, so here, and then what we want to do instead of the 5 here, we want to plus equals by the change amount. Okay. Now let's take a look at this inside the inspector one time. Okay. Now on our agility potion, under add new effect, we should have a new effect. There it is, change agility effect. Okay, we can give the description. We're going to say it adds 5. Okay. And we'll give it a change amount of 5. Yeah. Okay. Adds 5 agility. Now we also need to give it an object prefab to spawn in the world, and that can be found here in the in-game objects here. So what we want to do, we want to give it probably a potion prefab. Let's do that. Okay. We need to give it a name. So we'll name it agility potion. Okay. We'll leave the description out for now. And the sprite is what's going to what the sprite will be in the inventory screen, the UI. So let's pick something here. We can do that simple by just clicking on this right here, and then we can see all the sprites that's available to us. Let's find, let's say, there we go. That'll work. The potion icon. Okay. So now in order to spawn this potion in the world, we need our potion spawner to spawn a loot prefab, which spawns our new potion. Now the way we're going to do that is we're going to just simply copy this one. Okay, Control D, we'll copy it. We'll rename this to agility potion loot. Okay. Instead of the potion, it'll use our agility potion. Okay. So now we've got this new prefab for loot. Okay, and now inside of the potion spawner, we go down to the spawner sample, and our object to spawn will no longer be the potion loot, but our agility potion loot. Okay, let's change that. Okay. And now if we play the scene, we should see the agility potion spawned instead of the health potion. And there we have it. Okay. So let's go ahead, we'll pick one up. Let's pick them all up. Okay, we'll check our inventory. And there we have 4 agility potions, add 5 agility. Okay, so let's go ahead and test it out here. We have 5 now, 5 agility, up to 10, 15, 20, 25. Okay, and that is a permanent buff. Okay, it will never run out. So let's test it out once. We should be able to swing a lot faster now. Yeah, I didn't really test it without, but that is definitely slightly faster. Okay, so yeah, that's how we create our objects, or excuse me, our usable items and item effects. And in the interest of time, I'm going to cut this video short here. And in part 3, we will start to create our own classes and continue to make our own items and effects and really start to customize the game from here on out. So I hope to keep this series going and make something really fun out of this game. So we'll see you next time in part 3.